One time those two weren't the same.
This is gonna go, they
Okay,
weren't.
Katie, we're live.
Okay. Today is Wednesday, June 15th, and this is the Board of Commissioners, Lincoln County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. Myself and Commissioner Hunt are here. Commissioner Hall is on an excused absence. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. First up is adoption of our consent calendar. These are items of a routine nature, but either staff or commissioners can pull an item for further discussion or information. Commissioner Hunt, anything you would like to address in the consent
I'll
calendar?
move for adoption of the consent calendar as presented.
I second that. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. All right. Adoption of the consent calendar passes. Next on to discussion information. So these are items that we typically discuss and may or may not bring back for decision at a later meeting. First is our fee schedule for 2022-23 presented by Kristen Ewell County Council.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kristen Ewell, County Council. Before you, you have a packet of proposed changes to the 2022-2023 Lincoln County fee schedule. So you should only have the relevant pages. I'm just going to have you turn to the second page. This is regarding all departments. So dishonored check fee, which has not been raised in over 20 years, is going to go to $35. Flash drives, DVDs, and CD copies is going to actually be just the actual cost of providing that hardware to somebody making a records request. Any questions on that?
No questions, but I will make an observation. The dishonored checks going from $25 to $35. I think that's probably from an economic justice standpoint punishes those that are less likely to have the funds. That's why the check's being dishonored in the first place, but I'll just make that observation.
I think it's the fee that the county also gets charged by the institution.
I recognize that too, but it's
Okay.
still, I think, punishes probably those that are less likely to have a lot of liquidity.
Have you turned to page 4?
Actually, I have a question
Yeah.
on page 2, the
Yeah.
flash drive, DVDs, CDs.
Mhm.
Is that people requesting information to be put on those devices?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we put the information on, but the charge for the actual,
Hardware would be, passed
Okay.
along to the requester.
got it.
Okay, so page 4 is the Lincoln County Clerk. The only changes here is requested is 50 cents increase to the fee the clerk charges for passport processing. And then the passport and or card expedited processing for overnight mail return, it would be around $18.32, which is by statute.
No problem, no questions.
Okay. The next page is Lincoln County Health and Human Services. So this is Public Health Division for food service inspections. They are adding a benevolent restaurant inspection fee. So that would apply to churches, it would apply to anyone who has a nonprofit status, 501c3s. That is the fee that they're going to charge for those organizations to do a regular inspection of the premises that's required under law. And then just slight increases for the remaining restaurant based on size. And then just down the board for temporary restaurants, commissaries, mobile units and push carts. Based on an analysis of hourly rate, they were actually losing money based on their inspections. So that's been now brought into line with what the fee is charged by OHA to conduct those inspections. So that's not actually a loss to the department. No questions? I can move to page 9.
No questions.
Actually, I have a question on the nonprofit status restaurants. This is inspecting like their kitchens or something inside the building.
Right. So they're required if they prepare to have a
Meal
commercial.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so page 9 increases for swimming pools and spa inspections. And then also other fees is going to include bed and breakfast, organizational camps, and then just again, these are plan reviews for those remodeling just kind of miscellaneous fees.
Questions?
Okay. So the last page, page 10, these are for travelers accommodations and beds, bed and breakfasts, RV parks. So just slight increases to all those fees.
Is that the numbers there? Is that number of beds?
So for hotels, it's based on the number of beds,
Yeah.
which would be
okay.
associated with the fee. Yeah. And that's it. So page 11 for legal counsel, I'm submitting the fee for DVD video duplication because we do have an all county. You saw initially on the first page, an all county DVD, which is the actual cost to produce that. Yeah. And then I'm going to have Mr. Husing just come up to the table. Director Husing from Planning and Development. So he has proposed increases to most of the fees, and this was based on a comparison analysis of other counties that are similar in size. We are still behind when you do compare us to other similarly situated counties. So over the next few years, he's hoping to bring those in line with these other counties. So just going through the land use planning and zoning, he's proposed basically a 10, I was going to say actually looks like an 8 to 10% increase with these fees. And if you go to page 13, you'll see under miscellaneous, an administrative and technology fee. So under the statute, this is based on each permit that's applied for in the planning department. A technology fee and an administrative fee can be charged for each permit. And that's a 3.5% and 5% respectively. And that's something historically that has never been done, but looking at other counties and what's allowed under the law, that's something that, especially in this day and age, should be performed.
Madam Chair, the other big driver here is that I know many people in the community understand that our department went through quite an ordeal because we've been in a real estate boom. So we're dealing with COVID and a closed office and trying to make all these things work. And the number of people that have been trying to invest in Lincoln County has been over the moon. And so we just basically have been overwhelmed. And one of the really valid statements that people that were critical of us and actually trying to help us through this, because a lot of their businesses count on having deliverables out of our department in a timely way, said, we want you to start looking at what you're doing internally here and be able to maybe take this challenge and reevaluate where you are with your staffing and the ability to get information out to the public, because we were an outfit that was basically developed a couple decades ago where it was mostly locals doing land use stuff and people could come in and get information, have quality conversations. Now our real estate is an asset class. We're getting calls from all over the country, and the deluge of information requests has overwhelmed us. And so what that fee does in particular, Madam Chair and members and Commissioner Hunt, is starts creating a fund that we would and take other resources to modernize our department, to begin digitizing our records so that we can provide the services that people need. So that's really, it's not just, hey, we aren't collecting as much as others. We intend to put these resources to use for staff and technology so that we are a completely modernized department that's going to serve the public in a much better way.
Okay.
Questions?
So I have a question. I certainly support that concept. My question is, if I heard correctly, these increases is the first step toward reaching that level of sophistication?
So the technology fee is going to address software purchases and actually digitizing past records and then moving forward current records.
Yeah, but I think it's important to explain too that we're going through a comprehensive analysis of all the other jurisdictions, probably something we should have been doing a long time ago, and see where we stand vis-a-vis these other jurisdictions, because we're learning similar jurisdictions have more, they have more staff, they have more this and more that. So we've been kind of struggling over the last few years to try to continue to serve the public with some decent amount of public service and not inconveniencing them. So yes, we're going to be taking that effort and providing with transparency what we're learning. We'll make that information available to the public, but we're hoping eventually to provide additional staffing as well as these technological improvements to be able to cope with the new world that we find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions, Commissioner Hunt?
Nope.
Okay.
Not at
So
this time.
I have a couple of questions. We've kind of referenced, doing this analysis of other counties. I'm assuming other counties, not cities, correct?
Correct. Similar, and that is well underway, that review of our colleagues, right, our comps, who else is doing it out there and how are they doing it? What's their staffing? What are their fees? Right.
So it wasn't just looking at fees, but looking at those other county planning departments and staffing
and their
how much
fees,
staff they have
right,
and their fees. Okay.
right. Yes.
So I guess I would like to see those comparators. I think that would be helpful and looking at these is to see what those other comparable counties were.
Okay.
We
And
turn
then-
to, okay.
Sorry, just a note. The other comment I just wanted to make for the public watching is that I believe we're still waiving fees for wildfire survivors to rebuild, at least the fees that we have control over waiving. It's still happening. So,
That, to the best of my knowledge, that is, yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I just don't have at the top of my head exactly when your ordinance providing for that ends or not, and
could you check on that? Yeah,
we should.
so we're coming up on 2 years and
Right.
Right,
I know for doing this from memory that there was one extension already.
I think there was.
At least
Yeah,
one.
okay, if you
that-
could check on that, I don't know, I would
Sure.
appreciate that, yeah, because when you said it, 2 years was kind of binging in my head as maybe that was. the
Yeah, I'm
difference
really
that we
quite
should
certain
check.
that there was,
Yeah.
that you probably did a year and then you
Extended
went ahead
Yeah.
and because we weren't nearly done. I mean, and with the benefit of hindsight, we knew we were still well within.
Yeah, and there is some additional state resources coming that I think are gonna help people that haven't been able to get there yet, get there, so let's make sure those are waived.
Mhm.
And then I had a question on page 13, like the zone change and the non-conforming use. I'm assuming you pay those fees whether that's like a successful zone change or not. You pay to go through the process, or is that a payment you make?
Correct. Having
Yeah.
said that, I think it's important for everyone to understand that we do an awful lot of, there's a tremendous amount of time before an actual application comes in,
Yes.
where we do a lot of vetting with the potential applicant. And by the time, and now, of course, this is America, you can apply for anything and we can
Process
I'll
that.
process it and ultimately sometimes have to, of course, deny it because it doesn't meet the criteria. But we really try very, very hard not to have someone start getting out their credit card, applying until we're pretty sure that it's approvable. And so that's an iterative process with those folks. There are times, and that's the whole point of a vetting process, where you get into something deeper, and especially if there's public, you start now letting, even if we approved something after that administratively goes out to neighbors and they go, what about this and what about that? So everybody understands once you're applying for this, we truly try to make sure they understand that there's no guarantees. But if we're taking your money and starting a process, staff almost always is pretty confident that they can get there. So we don't, in a lot of situations, and I can't even recall in the 10 years that I've been doing this, that because that relationship is so tight with those applicants that by the time they apply for something, there's a pretty darn good chance, we think together, that we can get there. And they've modified their proposal to make it more, something that
In line.
looks in line with what we can approve.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this point.
So on page 14, 15, and 16, planning has added that administrative fee and technology fee to each subsection for permits, electrical, plumbing, mechanical. So that's going to apply for each permit that is applied for. And that's all planning has. Thank you, Director Husing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No further questions.
Any more questions,
None from
Commissioner?
me.
None from
Okay.
either at this time.
Okay, I'm gonna actually move on. So 17 is the same, just typical. I'm gonna have Mr. Kenyon, Director Kenyon, come up. So under the road division, we have a petition to vacate a public road or when a petition is applied for to vacate or decrease width of a county road. So this fee, and Mr. Kenyon can correct me, but I think it hasn't been changed in how many years? 25?
Roy Kenyon, Lincoln County Public Works Director. I actually do not know when it was changed. I
Initially,
know it
okay.
was prior to 2012 sometime.
Okay, so we are pretty significantly behind of what that fee should be, especially based on staff time that goes into vacation proceedings, which is pretty significant, not only for the road department, also for my department. So we are proposing an increase of 500 to 1,000 for both of those applications. If it does go to hearing for a vacation, that would be an additional $200 just to go through the hearing procedure.
So really, if it's successful, you're looking at $1,200.
I mean, some don't go to hearing,
So,
but yeah.
if you need
Yeah.
that. Did we use comparable counties for coming up with this?
So we did. I looked at other counties. I looked at Tillamook and Polk,
Mhm.
and actually that is right in line now with what they're charging.
Okay.
Questions?
Questions, Commissioner Hunt?
Nope.
Okay,
Great, thank you, Mr.
thank
Haney.
you.
Thanks. So moving on to the Sheriff's Office, the Support Services Division. So Senate Bill 554 increased the fees for a concealed handgun license. This was back in September of 2021. So it increased the initial license to $100 and then a renewal to $75, and that's by statute.
By state statute.
It is. And so if you know in footnote 29, it notes Senate Bill 554, and then that's been adjusted accordingly.
Okay.
Okay. Then on page 23, just some changes to copies when they have evidence requests for DVD, CDs, flash drives. It's just going to be the actual cost of production of those records. They had a flat fee, but costs have gone up for this hardware, and so it's more appropriate to just designate it as actual cost for the hardware. Any questions about that?
Oh, I'm looking for footnote 37,
Okay, it's highlighted at the bottom.
but I don't see it referenced in the material. Oh, there it is.
It is.
Under
It's-
actual cost.
Yes.
Up there. It's not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so under the short-term rentals on page 24, the ESER inspection, so this is in line with the ordinance 523. Once that is implemented, this inspection would be performed by the planning department. And this is just for on-site program review of existing septic systems, which is required under that ordinance. And so that's in line with that fee.
And how did we arrive at the cost?
It was compared just to the time hourly, basically time
To
it's
do
going to
that
complete the
inspection.
inspection and the reports required.
Sure, do you want to?
Thank you, commissioners. Again, for the record, Anno Husing, Planning Director. We went through this exercise actually a year or two or three ago, a year or two ago. And we have been basically subsidizing, the planning department has been heavily subsidizing the sheriff's office and the county when we did vacation rentals, because the demand on our department, this will resonate with you and the public, occupancy levels for vacation rentals became such a driver economically for the value of those vacation rentals that we were deluged on top of with all of these additional requests, and septic systems were failing. So we've worked, and I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining that we have in effect propped up that program for vacation rentals. And it has, and it's slowing us down doing other work. So and we needed to be there. But so we did an exercise a year or two ago. And then now that a lot of the legal issues that sort of are playing out, we're getting our bearings and readdressing this issue. We went through that entire process again. We spent several hours, our staff, doing a meticulous accounting with all hands on deck, trying to know exactly, all right, when something arrives in our department, who's going to touch it? What do they got to do? What's the approximate time that they do it? So really getting into the metrics in a way that we frankly haven't done in the past. And I think that's an important exercise to have a budget that reflects the true reality of trying to carry out these services.
Zero-based budgeting exercise.
Yeah, rather than just continuing to do what we've been doing. And so that's where we knew that our department really and look, we love working with the sheriff's office on the vacation rental thing. We're intricately involved. We should be. But we did, I think that kind of an exercise when we are really going right down to the minute, exactly knowing it goes from here to here to here to here to here, talking to each of those individuals that has to ground truth. All right, tell us exactly when it arrives on your desk, what do you got to do? What are the average timeframes? Explain that to us. And so it was interesting because when we did the exercise for the second time, just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it matched exactly what we had come up with before, which is either we got it wrong twice or we got it right twice. I don't, but I really felt good about how comprehensive and detailed our exercise was. And I think people need to understand that these are not casual, oh, let's just do this and let's do that. It's based on the reality of trying to make sure we can provide these services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do think it's a modest fee based on the amount of time that they're going to spend on each of these properties. The other just note is for the annual license renewal, it's increased by $25. Okay, and that's it for the fees. My proposal is to allow for public input for the next few weeks and then bring this back in 2 weeks to the next regular board meeting, which would be at the end of June. Is that the 29th? Or
Let me look up a calendar here and I can tell you. That would be 2 weeks would be the 29th.
okay, let's bring that back to the regular
Okay.
meeting
I'm fine
for
with that.
possible action.
Do we have
Okay,
consensus on that to come back in 2 weeks, Commissioner? Hunt?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on now. Fishermen involved in natural energy offshore wind discussion. Actually, it's not presented by Commissioner Jacobson. It's presented by our co-chair of our Fishermen involved in natural energy committee, who is Bob Etter. So Bob, come on up. If you could state your name for the record and then your presentation. Thanks.
Bob Etter. I have been, our family has operated a commercial fishing business in Newport since 1985. We owned the fishing vessel Timmy Boy. 15 years ago, this commission created fishermen involved in natural energy, a committee that has persisted. It was created originally when there was a rash of applications for wave energy development. And it represented all the major commercial fishing activities along with charter and individual recreational fishermen. It's been a very diverse group and it has persisted. Had, like a lot of things, kind of a dormant period during the COVID experience, but it appears to be roaring back to life. This group has generated a letter to present to this commission. About 4 minutes to read it. Or
Yeah,
have
you can read it. And
considered this
actually, I
letter?
don't know if it ended up in everyone's packet or not, but I do
I
have
don't have the
some.
letter, but I do have
The draft
proposed
resolution.
draft
There's extra
resolution.
copies if the public or whoever wanted to.
I have seen
See
this
that?
previously.
And we have it on the screen.
Oh, you do? Okay, great. Thank you, Casey.
Offshore wind development activities are being fast-tracked off the West Coast. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, has identified 2 call areas off Oregon for the future siting of wind farms. The call areas make up over 1 million acres of ocean off Southern Oregon and include fishing grounds that have been utilized for generations. Fishing businesses that are home ported in Newport have used these areas extensively to harvest sustainable seafood resources, and locking fishermen out of these areas will directly impact Lincoln County's economy. The Bowen process is not only flawed, but also skewed to prioritize the development of offshore wind energy at any cost to existing ocean users. Bowen has never rejected a project based on negative impacts to marine life or ocean stakeholders, even though negative impacts have been projected and in many cases projected to be significant. Stakeholders do not have a meaningful seat at the table, and to protect current ocean users who support coastal economies, a resolution prioritizing those users over offshore wind development should be undertaken. Other ports and counties have taken similar action to protect their economies from the displacement of ocean users. Hundreds of millions of pounds of Oregon seafood, including Pacific whiting, Dungeness crab, Oregon pink shrimp, groundfish, and sablefish, have all been harvested from the current call areas. While Bowen has stated they are looking for wind energy areas that can provide 3 gigawatts of energy in the short term, they have confirmed that they are likely to expand offshore wind development beyond 3 gigawatts into the future. We must protect our fishermen, processors, and coastal communities now. Further negative impacts to marine mammals, fisheries, and the marine ecosystem are unknown but anticipated. This too will have a negative impact on fishermen, processors, and coastal economies. The Fine Committee, Fishermen and Natural Energy, recommends the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners take action to pass a resolution that protects current ocean users and the environment itself as a priority over offshore wind energy development activities. The Bowen process is nothing like the process that took place to develop the PAC wave sites, and Bowen has shown their disinterest in meaningful engagement. The current call areas are proof of that. We ask that you pass a resolution that does the following. 1, prioritize current ocean users and stakeholders over offshore wind energy development companies. 2, write a letter to Bowen on the current Oregon call areas and ask for them to be moved outside 1,300 meters. This move does not alleviate all concerns and unknown risks of offshore wind turbines to the marine environment and ecosystem, but it does mitigate concerns around displacing fishermen from prime fishing grounds. And 3, encourage Bowen to slow down the process and do a programmatic environmental impact study before leasing out any grounds. Offshore energy development may be something that can help the climate crisis, but the siting of offshore wind farms is critically important, and the impacts to the environment must be understood and known before a project is supported moving forward. The risk to Oregon's sustainable seafood supply and the rural coastal economies that fisheries support could be catastrophic if the process moves forward as currently planned. We must act now to ensure sustainable fisheries continue to be a hallmark of coastal Oregon. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Bob. Questions or?
No, I don't have any questions. I think that this is certainly a critical issue. I was involved in the site selection for the PAC West wave energy. And at that time we were competing with a site off of Reedsport. And I think it's good that we were successful in being the site that was selected for the connected onshore wave energy testing. I do note that the resolution talks about possibility of a similar type process, and I think that's a good idea. I also remember Commissioner Thompson stating more than once that, we're certainly interested in renewable energy, and I certainly support the need and the benefit of renewable energy. Let's not forget that the seafood industry is also renewable food. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And I would hope that rather than getting in a battle of who's got priorities or who's got rights, I would hope that there can be a collaborative effort like there was at the Pac West offshore wave energy site. Certainly Fine was involved in that. And there was an agreement reached between the parties that identified as satisfactory sites. So that would be my hope as we look at renewable energy. I think it's interesting to note that when I drove to Whitman College in the summer of 1968, wind farms were unheard of. When I drove to Whitman in the month of May, there were so many windmills that I couldn't count them. So the industry has come a long ways in a short period, relatively short period of time. And certainly land that is really not suitable for agricultural activities can be identified for wind farms. And I would hope that some of that same process can apply to wind farms in our oceans. So I think it's certainly an important effort, and I think it's one that I hope all the parties can work together to find a satisfactory collaborative solution.
Thanks, Commissioner Hunt. So a couple of points I'm hoping you can kind of help clarify as the fisherman in the room, Bob. So one is, what does moving outside 1,300 meters do?
1,300
Why is that the
meters.
magic number? Yeah.
1,300 meters is, I believe right now, the outside, the westernmost edge of these call areas. It's about 700 fathoms, to use the terms that are more familiar to those of us in fisheries. And the vast majority of fishing activity takes place inside of that. That will not alleviate interference for the albacore fishery, both recreational and commercial. But most of the other fisheries take place inside of that. One of my major fisheries is for sable fish, which we prosecute between 100 and 700 fathoms. These devices are going to be different than the ones that Commissioner Hunt's describing on the Columbia River. They're going to dwarf all of those. They will, each one will be taller than the Space Needle in Seattle. In their most benign state, I mean, not even thinking about environmental effects to the California current, to the upwelling that turns over the bottom like you would a garden off of this coast, and other possible ecological issues. In their most benign state, they will create a navigational hazard, not just displacing fishing, but it'll be like a reef. You will have to go around wherever they are. So it's axiomatic that the further out they are, the less of a hazard they will be to boat traffic and fishing activities. And we have learned since the call areas came out a couple months ago that on the East Coast, where they're talking now about floating wind. To date, everything in Europe and on East Coast United States is hard mounted shallow water wind, very different technology. Anyway, in Maine and I think in the Carolinas, they're talking about going much deeper than 1,300 meters. So we know it's doable. We know it costs more to send a transmission line in, but to me, that's a very, very important feature. maybe another thing to mention, though, the call area, the two call areas, I think they identify them as Brookings and Coos Bay. I know when they were announced and I first saw the map, I could see that I was crabbing in one of the call areas. So just to illustrate that these are places that we, those of us fishing out of this county, that we use. I'm certain that we have Newport-based boats at this moment in fishing in these call areas. So it's not a remote thing. And because we know it may work out well. We could expect the possibility of call areas north of these two initial ones in the future.
Yeah, and one of the things I am worried about is if the majority of those call areas are developed, and as you said, you can't fish in them, you can't transit through, vessels, with permits have to go somewhere. And so then there becomes increased pressure on the resources we have here, because part of what makes the fishery sustainable is that it's spread out across the whole state of Oregon. And so when you start concentrating that fishery, not only would you see more user conflicts happen because there's only so many places to lay crab pots or whatever you're going to do, but then I fear that we're going to be in some sustainability issues with the resource we have left. And so, understanding cumulative impacts, not just the cumulative impacts inside the site, but the cumulative impacts of what happens when all that fishery pressure is moved off into another area, I think is an important part of this as well. So just some other points I wanted to make is both myself and Walter Chuck from the Port of Newport are the two local people on the BOEM Offshore Wind Task Force. I would say that's been a really limited engagement. They haven't really engaged the task force very often and not very meaningful. I think we got the call areas 48 hours, something like that, before our last task force meeting. So didn't really give us a lot of time to have meaningful engagement with the community before we were suddenly, in this meeting needing to provide comment on that. We actually opened up this meeting room and had several fishermen and others come to the task force meeting and kind of facilitate public comment there. But, they presumably had those sites for a lot longer, than 2 days than we had them before the meeting. It's also kind of unclear what happens or has happened with the information that BOEM has received in terms of their actual decision-making process. And typically those decision makers are not in attendance at those meetings. So the actual process and how decisions gets made and how information is taken from the public and actually used to form those decisions is really unclear, which makes it frustrating to know, how you need to engage as the public. There's also some missing data sets that BOEM has actually admitted that they are missing. One is for sablefish, which I know is an important fishery for you. And the second one is information on short-tailed albatross, which is already a species of concern. There actually was a joint letter between Audubon and the fishing industry and several other environmental groups around, these missing data sets. So while we're kind of focusing on the fishery impacts, there's a lot of potential environmental impacts too that are coming up with the conservation community. And there's several other missing data sets too, but those are the two that BOEM has actively said we don't have those, and we haven't used data we don't have to inform where these current lease areas are at. So we do have a draft resolution. So this is similar to the resolution that both the city of Newport and the Port of Newport, and I think maybe the city of Toledo is in process of considering. So this is very similar to that. I actually took it and made some creative edits, but I think the skeleton of it is relatively similar. I don't know if we want to read that for discussion, or Commissioner Hunt, have you read that or have questions about it? Or
I've read it. No, I
Okay.
don't have any particular questions. There might be a word or two I would
okay,
change, but at this time, I mean, it would be minor clerical
You're gonna catch my spelling errors. and-
No, I didn't say that.
Okay. All right. And Bob, have you seen the draft and was there any changes you felt needed to be made or?
No. I am, and I'm confident that the fine committee is supportive of this draft.
Okay.
And all 7 points in it. Same comment as Commissioner Hunt, 1 or 2.
Little comments. I may or may not have been quadritasking at the time I was doing this, so. So I think the plan is that we will have staff work on correcting Katie's few minor, mistakes. And probably bring it back next week for adoption, which is what we typically do with stuff is, we might receive more public comment or just tweak this a little bit. And then we would bring it back to formally adopt the resolution. And what the resolution really does is it basically directs the county to send a letter to 3 different agencies, kind of conveying our concerns. And I believe the public comment period for BOEM is open until the 28th, 27th, 28th. Okay, yeah, so we need to once we adopt it, we can get that letter in before the 28th. So anything else?
Maybe just to respond to Commissioner Hunt's comments, the letter that I just read to you talks about prioritizing stakeholders. The resolution that's presented doesn't, it has recommendations.
I've noted that.
And I think that's important there. Regarding one of the deficiencies that Commissioner Jacobson just mentioned, the short-tailed albatross, by way of contrast, the approach to fisheries management is so precautionary compared to this. Entering into these leases without an environmental impact statement, it doesn't even compute. It's hard to believe that it comes from the same federal government.
Because
that
what's
manages
the
fisheries.
allowable fishery take on short-tailed albatross? 1? I tried to look it up before the meeting started.
If 2 short-tailed
Yeah.
albatross die in fishing activities, we're out of there. We stop.
Yeah, and not the individual vessel, the whole fleet
Yeah,
stops.
The whole
Yeah,
fleet stops.
yeah.
And the blades of the turbines at the outermost part will be traveling 200 miles an hour, something that the albatross don't experience in nature. They haven't even looked at it. So just by way of contrast, this is the kind of thing that we think should be.
Well, and
considered.
also many of those vessels would have observers. I mean, fishing vessels often have observers depending on the fishery. So there would be someone there to document a short-tailed albatross running into your running lights. Something where at this point, it's unclear whether there's 24/7 observers on a floating wind turbine watching to see if an albatross hits a blade at 200 miles an hour. So, and I don't know if you could see that at 200 miles an hour either.
It's probably
Yeah.
possible,
Uh-huh.
not
Yeah.
planned.
So, what's in comparison, and also another issue, what's the allowable take for whales in the crab fishery?
Really, it's none.
0. Yeah. So same issue.
There's been no research as to how this might affect it. The fine committee that this commission created, it has become kind of a marine spatial planning committee in general. It was originally about wave energy, but we considered marine reserves. We're addressing this. I'm sure there'll be at-sea aquaculture and maybe at-sea mining. Who knows what will come in the future, but the development of the PAC wave site is really significant. I think it's significant globally that it truly was a collaborative venture, and it happened right in this room.
Mhm.
So our response to this haphazard process from BOEM, it's not a NIMBY response. It's not a not in my backyard response. Because we have been proactive in developing this test site. We know it's a fit for our community, and we know that testing new technologies before trying to pull them out to scale is the sane approach.
Yeah, and I am meeting with Dr. Hales tomorrow, who is the current kind of director of PacWave, to talk with him about, from his end of things, what it would take to add on a offshore wind, testing facility to that. I know already from working on that project for 15 plus years with you, Bob, that it's currently too shallow to do that. But, what would running a cable from the existing space out further, or, connecting it onto a larger, deeper space take? So we're having that conversation tomorrow to see if they have interest there, and what he thinks it would take to add that on.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the resolution does talk about exactly that, either an addition, which you've already addressed, Commissioner Jacobson, or creation of an additional PacWave-like project. And I think, as you've already pointed out, Mr. Eder, that the PacWest, in my mind, the PacWest project was a great example of collaborative efforts to identify a site that addresses the needs of all of the parties involved. And I would hope that can be done again.
Yeah, and that was, the siting process for that was 2 years, 2.5 years, but really the siting process for that project was 10 years, because the conversation started in communities many, many years before we started drawing circles on maps to try to gain trust and understanding and build those relationships. So, it's a long process. However, I would say that doing it right is kind of that saying of, you go slow to go fast later. And once we did all that, even though it was a unsolicited lease request from OSU to Boehm for that site, it was not a open lease block like is what's happening now. Because we had done all that work, and it had been documented, it was I'm going to say relatively painless, and then they're going to call me and say it was not painless, but at least from understanding impacts of users and going through that EIS and NEPA that they had to do, it was a lot easier for them because the work was done on the front end. So they already had a lot of that information and connection. I know, Bob, you and I were involved in going through that leasing process with them. And I do remember a couple of conversations where Boehm actually didn't believe us that we had worked through a lot of our site selection and stakeholder issues, because that's not the typical way that they do things. And they had a really difficult time believing that the fishing industry had signed off on the project, because they had never had that before. So it was challenging for them
We
to.
had real conversations. We weren't just checking boxes.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being here and presenting to us, and we will bring this back next week, and my guess is we'll adopt it. Seems like we're probably there. So,
Well, I would imagine it would be an
Thank you.
agenda item as
Yeah.
a resolution that the board can address at that time.
absolutely. Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving on, bid award of longitudinal stripping presented by Roy Kenyon.
Oh, that's striping.
Oh, striping. Did I say stripping? Oh my
It
God.
says
okay.
striping.
Well, it's like there could be a stripping
I
process
hope
to a
not.
road. I mean,
It's not that kind of meeting.
Once again,
Striping.
I'm Roy Kenyon, Lincoln County Public Works Director. And in layman's terms, we're talking about paint striping of our roads.
It was going so good there for a while.
So far, you're doing pretty good, Director Kenyon.
been a while
I'd
since
suggest you move along.
On May 18th of this year, Lincoln County Public Works opened bids for our paint striping program. And Hick striping is the low bid at $113,788.15. And what I bring to you today is a request to approve this bid. And so we can get our contract signed, and once the weather straightens out, whenever that is, we can get busy on this. Points of interest on this is last year, we asked for bids on the exact same project because it's an annual thing that we do. Hick striping was also the winner of that bid, but last year it cost us a little over $62,000. And so it's almost doubled in price. And basically what it is fuel, price paint. And I don't know what we're going to look at for next year. I can't imagine it going up much. Also, just as a point of interest, we are also victims of supply chain issues.
Just gonna ask.
The truck that was supposed to supply all of our paint came in beginning of the week with only a third of the requested amount. So right now we have enough to do a third of our roads. They've actually quote guarantee us that they would have this paint to us by the end of July. We're trying to confirm that right now. And so we will eventually get it and we will get the project done, but it may be in stages.
So you're hoping to the rest of the paint by the end of July, and so then you'd still have presumably a weather window in August.
Yeah, and historically, we've always waited to do our paint striping until August, mostly because other than the last couple of years, July was kind of a crapshoot when it came to having long stretches of good weather. And in order to get the striping done, we actually have to have dry roads. And so if you have rain one day, usually it takes 2 or 3 days for it actually to dry out to the point where you can restripe. So historically, we've always done our striping in August and into first part of September. And so I would assume that is when it's going to happen this year. Now, the contract window is actually July 7th to September 15th, I think is what it is. So it's a large window, but reality is that you can't paint in the rain, you can't paint on wet roads. And so it'll most likely happen towards the end of summer.
And you can't paint without paint.
And we can't paint without paint.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so, but that all should come together. I'm not horribly concerned.
Okay.
Mostly because they said, yeah, we'll get it in July. They didn't say you'll get it in July of 2023, which is what I'm getting on a lot of other things.
So I have a question. If my memory serves me correct, and my children remind me that my memory isn't as young as it used to be. Didn't we used to contract with Benton County
We
to
did.
provide this?
We did. And that worked out really well for us until basically the entire Benton County striping crew retired at the same time. They lost all of their skilled operators and basically were unable then to continue on. Lynn County, I believe it's Lynn County actually also does some of this, but they are booked. And so, yeah, Hick Striping used to do this for us back in the, 1990s, 2000s, clear up until roughly 2013, I think is when they used to do it for us. We found that what Benton County could offer at that time better fit our needs here on the coast. And so we changed over and went with Benton County until that service was no longer available. And so now we're back to advertising for bid in this process, and Hicks has gotten it the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. No further questions for
Right,
me?
another question, and I know this isn't routine, but if you noticed the date that we opened bids was May 18th, and I have to apologize because we're kind of behind schedule on this. Our hopes was that we would have an approved contract sometime soon. My hopes was that I could actually have to bring a contract to the board for signatures maybe next week if I could get an approval of the bid this week.
Definitely not the way we normally do things, but I don't have a problem.
You can,
Legal counsel.
you can have action on this item. I would ask if there's any public input.
Yeah, good idea. Let's do that. Casey, can we see if there's any public input specific to the application of longitudinal pavement markings? Pavement markings, that's a better word. Okay.
There is not.
Longitudinal lines.
Does anybody want to raise their hand or?
Yeah, raise your virtual hand online if you want to comment about this item. No? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to comment specifically on this item? Nope. Okay.
So are we bringing it back for a decision next week, or are we looking for a motion
I think
this
we're
week?
looking for a motion this week.
I'll move to approve the bid award of longitudinal striping to Hicks Striping for $113,718.15.
I will second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
And then Mr. Kenyon, you can add that as a consent item,
I will.
the contract.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Jerry Herbie, just for the record. I think it was, yeah, 788. It might have been said that it was 718, but it was what was listed.
I'm sorry, what?
You lost us.
You lost us.
On the amount.
Unless I read it wrong, I read the amount of the
113.
memo. $113,788.15.
Jerry.
Counselor Urbidge, we lost you. Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Okay,
I thought that the motion was for in that figure 718 instead of 788. And that's the only reason why I brought it up.
Oh, maybe I misspoke. The intent was for $113,788.15.
I think we're covered. Are we okay?
I think,
Okay.
I thought that's what you said.
All right.
Actually,
Thank you.
thank you. Do we need to check the motion?
As long as her notes reflect it.
Yeah, okay. All right, moving on under Commissioner reports. Commissioner Hunt, do you have anything additional to report?
Well, I have a couple items. Participated in the CIS board meeting yesterday. And I'm one of two commissioners that sit on that statewide board that provides insurance services to almost every county and city within the state of Oregon. Primary item on the agenda was the budget, and the budget was approved, and no different than many agencies. This is a budget time of year. And I'll be able to serve on that board through the end of this calendar year, at which time AOC will be tasked with appointing a second commissioner to the board. The current other commissioner is John, I'm going to apologize, John Schaefer, I believe, from Umatilla County. And he'll continue to serve because his term is not ending at the end of the calendar year. The other thing I'll mention is I would encourage everyone to give blood. Yesterday, I happened to drive to the Toledo Thriftway store, and there was a blood mobile in the parking lot. And it's been a while since I've given blood, but I found the time to give some blood. Very painless process, couple of needle pricks, reality. And I think it's certainly something that anyone that is able to do should do. Certainly makes a difference in the lives of others. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunt. And thanks for the reminder to donate. We'll go do that.
Yeah, the blood mobile will be in Walport today and in Newport tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I attended earlier this week, actually, with Tim Johnson and Casey. We all went together to the Cascadia Rising Emergency Operations Center open house at the Commons. So really nice to see all of our Emergency Operations Center partners set up and learning about our radio operators and search and rescue, and Reserve Medical Corps was there, and our contractor we have that can come and set up tents for us in emergency was there as well, and actually had some of the tents set up, which I'd never seen before. So That was really nice to see everyone there and see what we're doing to be prepared for a Cascadia event. So there's also a lot of other elected officials there from cities. It was nice to see them there, and several new emergency managers, both from Lincoln City and from Newport, were both there learning. It's a really nice event, and we were there a long time. I mean, we spent quite a while there. So learned a lot, and also took some personal information home on planning for a disaster that was there and getting all your financial and important documents kind of organized. So thank you, Sheriff's Office and Emergency Management, for putting that on, not just for us, but for the whole community to come and learn. So,
And
all
then
right.
could you note the Juneteenth on Monday? And then-
I will after public comment.
Okay.
Yeah. We're now moving on to public comment. This is general public comment. So first we'll start with our virtual or online public comment. So if you would like to make public comment and you are online, go ahead and raise your virtual hand and we'll get to you.
Look like it.
Okay, don't see anybody virtually. And so now we'll move to in-person public comment. There is a sign-up sheet over there. So Casey, do we have anyone?
No, we do not, unless anyone else in the audience.
Anyone else wants to give public comment today?
Nope.
No, okay. So our other scheduled meetings before we adjourn, there is a kind of typo on our agenda for today. Monday, June 20th is actually our new Juneteenth holiday that is being recognized. And so our staff meeting is Tuesday, June 21st at 10 a.m., which is hybrid. And then our Board of Commissioners meeting will be Wednesday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. here in this room and hybrid as well.